Hello and welcome back to another Let's Play of Factorio. This would be episode 3. I know we've had a couple of rocky starts, with some confusion over whether I had installed Alpha 13 in the first episode. I had not. And then the second episode, which had 45 minutes of dead space, likely because of a rendering issue. I still haven't figured out exactly what happened there. But we've got some little bit of a base fixing so far. Just taking down unnecessary turrets and replacing some pipes that got eaten. With any luck, this video will be the beginning of the end of the rocks. Yeah. For now, I'm thinking I'm trying to develop my mining a little bit. I need to get enough resources together that I can build some roboports, that I can start building some robots, that I can start using to tear down my base, and then just kind of rebuild it to be what I want it to be. And that seems to work out pretty well for most of this episode. Right now, I'm just continuing base fixing. I realized that I am completely out of petroleum gas, and this time that is because there is too much light oil. So we're going to be building another light oil storage tank just to keep the light oil from clogging up the pipes, basically. Just to keep the hydrocarbon production going. We have not researched advanced oil processing yet, so cracking is not an option, though it is something that I will likely be doing fairly soon in the future, as soon as I get my blue science figured out. Haven't even started looking at blue science. I am very much busy with making red cards right now and defending against attacks because my turrets are out of bullets. Thing is, if I'm trying to build roboports, I need 45 red cards per roboport. I need red cards for logistic robots. I need red cards for chests. I just need a lot of red cards in general. And so I'm going to be building one assembler right now. It's not going to be optimized, just like the rest of this little introductory factory is not optimized at all. The idea here is just to have some sort of production. It doesn't need to be extreme, doesn't need to be major, just produce. And I'll figure out the rest later as soon as I actually start building a factory. So we're going to be doing a little bit of a manual feeding. I did end up making a copper wire assembler because honestly I just don't have any stockpiles of copper wire. I'm not trying to make any stockpiles of copper wire, even though on every single Factorio game that I've played that's lasted longer than 50 hours, if you look at the production screen, basically starting about 10 hours into the game, copper wire is the most produced thing. It goes usually copper wire, copper plates, iron plates. Those are the three things that you make the most of in a Factorio game. And that's just because, with copper, you need lots of copper wire for modules, just because you need a lot of circuits. Now you'll notice I'm kind of going off of the 1-to-1 miner to smelter ratio, and that's because the 1-to-1 ratio isn't working right now. The reason it's not working is because my electricity is at about 80% of the demand, so I'm not making all the electricity that I should be making. I'm going to be fixing that shortly. For now, however, I want to start making flying robot frames. So I got a battery maker set up, I've got my electric engines going into an assembler, and I'm just going to be tossing some steel and some green cards in for the other the th- the other things that I need for the robot maker. I'm gonna take a look at what kind of research I want to be doing soon. Kind of want to try out flamethrower turrets. I haven't tried them out even on my well-established games, but in the interests of electricity, I am going to go with solar panels for now. Um, if anything, just so I can start making solar panels. I don't expect to be making a giant solar farm right away, but I could just fill in some gaps around my base. Like I've got that entire line of solar or the little what are they called? Power poles. I could just fill in that area with solar plants. Don't really need the room. I'm also just building that turret. I don't think it's ever going to be used. I don't think biters will ever go that way. But just in case, I now have complete turret coverage to every single entrance to my base, short of the giant gap in the bottom that I actually don't address at all this episode. There's going to be some shooting down there. Some of my turrets are going to run out of bullets, but I still just don't fill in that gap just because biters don't go through it. So I'm not particularly worried about that. Now I start looking into how I'm going to deal with power. Again, it's not going to be the most space efficient way to do it. It's actually going to be not space efficient at all. Um, my goal isn't to be as efficient as possible. My goal is to just get things to start working. And as a result of that, I'm going to have to juggle these belts a little bit just so I could put a pipe down. And then I'm going to do a second row of electricity right there. Well, I'm going to end up replacing it, of course, not right away, but that's where it's going to go. There we go. So I'm tearing down all these steam power plants, and the idea is, now that I've got that little piece of pipe sticking out, there we go, I put some underground pipe down, and then I can fit the steel power, or the steam power plants in right there. Add a couple of power poles, run some pipe all the way through. Boom, we've got power again, in theory, once I connect it up. Now here, we start running into some issues. I was thinking I need to power those, all of the inserters that are adding coal. So I'm gonna end up putting two odd little gaps right there. And my reasoning here is I can take coal out of a boiler and put it into a new boiler using inserters. So I could literally just have one coal line feeding entire stacks of these inserters, and not really a problem. However, the problem that I do have right now is the absolute lack of power poles. So I'm going to go off, collect wood for a while. At this point, yeah, I'm thinking, grab a stack of wood. That'll make 2 stacks of power poles. Works out great. Haven't really researched the advanced power poles, i.e. the big ones and the 3 7x7 medium ones. I don't remember their exact names. But I will soon have extra steam power. And of course, since long-handed inserters can grab over power poles, I'm using those. That's why we've got the 2 boilers that are just sticking way out. That's just so I could have a long-hander grab from one boiler and drop it into the next boiler. Of course, I still got the same 14 in a line, same ratio for 1 output pump, 10 steam engines. Works great. And now I'm just going to start collecting red cards. I'm trying to build my first Roboport, which takes 45 red cards. It's kind of expensive. It's going to take a little while. So I'm going to be coming back here and just grabbing red cards whenever I can. Actually, somewhat often. Going to be throwing a bunch of green cards. into my red card producer. That's not going to do much, however. And let's just grab some construction robots and put down my first roboport. And I wanted to cover all of the walls around my oil. The reasoning here is that I can just throw some repair packs in there, throw a couple of robots in there, and not really worry about defending it. As you can see, we've got some robots coming down and fixing my turrets. Of course, the roboports, when they're first charging up their batteries, they just completely crash my entire electrical grid. It's not that much juice. It doesn't say how much juice a single roboport stores, but it will be an annoying amount for a little while. As you can see, roboports start out at the very top of my electrical consumption and then just kind of slowly fall down the list as they fully charge up, stop using as much juice. I'm gonna save the game, take a little break here. This is actually a completely new video, also a completely different day, and I just got a new achievement, which is the same achievement that that's the first achievement you're gonna get for any kind of established factory, and that's trigger an attack through pollution. I think this is something to do with mods. I haven't been able to find a specific bug report about it, so I don't think it's supposed to be a bug. I think it's just because I'm using a modded game, and the achievements are just counting again and again separately every single time I start the game up because I've got the RSO mod in play. I'm also going to take down my science. Not really any particular reason for it, besides I have about 800 red and 800 green science already in storage. I don't really need to be making much more, especially considering I'm trying to rebuild the factory. So up there where I was running around earlier, you can see I was trying to figure out what I want to do for my furnace block, because that's probably the most important part of any factory, and of course I'm gonna throw some more copper into my bullet maker. Just because bullets are always necessary, sadly. When you're dealing with a force of nature like biters, bullets are the only solution. It's not often that that's true, but in this case it is. Now I'm going to start walling in through some of these lakes, get my turret coverage up, and hopefully I can wall off enough of my factory to start actually working on it without fear of any biter reprisals. So I've walled off most of that. As a result of walling off most of the stone production, I don't think there's going to be any biters coming through there, so I'm just going to take down the turret that was there. I'm going to fill in the gaps here. It's going to look a little odd. Oh well, I don't really mind. I'm trying to fill in the smallest points just to save on walls. I'm also going to drop a turret to cover all 3 sets of walls. Don't really expect that turret to get much business, but at the same time, in case it does, it's always good to have an extra turret lying around. I'd rather it's it's like guns, you know. You'd rather have one and not need it than need it and not have it. Though in real life, like unless you're a soldier, you just really don't need a gun. Or if you're really living off the land and a good chunk of your actual food supply comes from your ability to hunt, then I guess, yeah, it's cool if you have a gun, because you have a use for it. If you're fantasizing about shooting muggers and or burglars, I mean, alright, you got your adult Barbie dolls, have fun. Just don't accidentally shoot me, please. Because I'm legitimately afraid that you might. Anyway, yeah, that's one of the problems of being a juvenile. Even though I'm not a delinquent, people assume that I am. And people with guns that assume that I'm a delinquent could very easily become problematic. So now I've just completed the curtain wall around my base, and the entire top half of my base is pretty much entirely safe. It's not completely safe. Ideally, I would have, there we go. Now it's even more safe because I've got complete turret coverage for all the walls. I would rather have just like a line of laser turrets and the power to run them, but for now it's gonna work. So as a result of that, I can go and take down these turrets, which is gonna give me a lot more bullets that I can put in my other turrets, and a couple more walls. I'm also going to, I think right now I think I'm researching. No, right now I'm researching advanced materials because before I start rebuilding my base, I want to have electric furnaces. I'm going to be using mostly electric furnaces in my smelting block, and the way that I'm building my smelting block, it's going to be much easier if I have a bunch of electric furnaces already ready to go. I could keep using regular steel furnaces, and it would be not necessarily impossible. It's definitely doable to use them. I would just prefer to not deal with it. And I've just hooked up 2 more roboports. We now have 1 continuous network. So all those walls over there that are getting damaged by biters are actually going to get repaired by repair packs coming from the very bottom roboport where I put some repair packs a little while ago. And I'm pretty happy with that. I've got an entire side of my base is now covered with repair robots. The only thing that's left is to make sure the turrets don't run out of bullets, and that side will be pretty much safe until the biters evolve. Which they haven't yet. The way evolution is done has been recalculated. I haven't played with the evolution mechanics too much. From what I understand, it's supposed to be a inverse exponential curve now. So they're gonna, instead of pollution going up at a linear rate, it's going to level off the higher it goes. Evolution, not pollution. The higher evolution goes, it's going to level off. Ideally. Sadly, real life is rarely ideal. But this isn't real life, so life is good. I'm gonna build a little solar panel assembler because I figure, why not? Can't really go wrong with extra solar panels. Eventually, I'll probably just make an entire solar base, just an area full of solar panels for power. I'm also gonna move the miners down a little bit because I realized that with the placement of them as they were, they would have left a little 1x5 crease of iron ore unmined. And just to check on oil, maybe grab some plastic. I'm gonna need that for the red cards, so let's do that. Drop it off. Perfect. Of course, I need to drop some more copper into the. Oh nope, I already dropped some copper in the wire maker. Life is good. Now I'm gonna be working on my smelting design. This is a design that I've used in one of my other factories. I like it a lot. It's not this is based on a design by someone else who I also completely forgot the name of. I'm sorry if you should be credited, but it's not the exact same design. The major difference between this design and their design is that I'm putting my inserters together. So I've got 2 inserters right next to each other, right where 2 turrets are, or 2 smelters are placed right next to each other. That way, I get to save on power poles a little bit. And I think it's a pretty cool design. It works. It's scalable, or it's tileable. I guess the technical term for that is it tessellates. Though I don't know if it exactly tessellates because it's kind of like a linear tessellation, so I can just line things up so in rows. I can't really do giant crazy 3D tessellations, but that's oh well. Now that I've got a blueprint of it, I'm just gonna tear everything down, and we're gonna use that blueprint. Of course, it would be nice if we had a Roboport, because then the blueprint that we are using is actually going to be quite obvious, and it will be built on its own automatically. Um, so far, not really particularly worried though. I'm gonna put a random splitter in there. There's not really any good reason to do that besides it's gonna make sure that the entire row of copper isn't clogged. Not really particularly important, but I guess it's better than nothing. Keeps all the miners mining. I think one thing I've noticed is, if you, let's say I've got like 75 or 80 miners or something, and I just cover an entire deposit all at once, you'll always end up mining from the outside in, because as the belts get clogged with ore, the inner miners aren't going to mine. And one way that I've found to combat that is to use a lot of splitters so that the belts are always feeding into the main belt using a splitter. It's not going to stop the clogging problem, but the only way to stop the clogging problem is just to have an insane amount of chests and inserters. But it will stop the offset mining. So since the splitters always let half the ore in one direction, half in the other, so you're gonna always end up taking ore from the inside miners as well as from the outside miners. And I'm just gonna drop a bunch of solar panels because extra power means less coal being burned for my steam engines, which means a little bit less pollution, which is good for me because the biters are kind of getting angry. Also gonna start making red belts. Not really important per se. They are eventually important because you want to have red belts so you can make blue belts, and then you want to have blue belts because blue belts are fast. But, it's better than nothing. I figure I might as well do that. Well, I'm not making any science anyway. Plus, then I might as well replace most of my furnaces or the furnace belts with red belts. Not really good with editing blueprints yet, so I just end up clearing it and starting all over again. Ideally, I probably should have just dropped it and then edited it on the ground, then cleared it, but oh well. It doesn't really save me much. Now, at this point, I realize that these guns are out of bullets, and both of these guns are out of bullets, and they are very much getting eaten. So I'm going to be rebuilding a couple walls before I realize that I have enough walls to actually do that. I'm going to be making some repair packs, fixing up all these walls, and putting bullets in guns. That'll last for the entirety of this episode. Hopefully it'll last for longer than that, but I am not sure. Sadly, I did end up losing a turret. It's not that big of a loss considering a turret's like 40 iron plates and 10 copper plates or something like that. But, it's 40 iron plates I could have done for something else. So let's go back to the blueprint. Basically making the same exact blueprint as before, except I'm using red belts and red splitters now, which would be very helpful because then you can get more ore throughput. Let's drop some power poles down and make a blueprint. Perfect. Now let's just tear the whole thing down. and I have decided that since there was that one iron deposit I noticed earlier up above my base, I'm going to be putting all of the smelters to the top of my base. And as a result of that... No, wait, I need a roboport first, don't I? Yeah, I think I'm making a roboport, and I'm making some big power poles because they transfer electricity better. We use that to power my first roboport out in this direction, which is going to be on its own separate network, sadly, for now. But we will figure something out. I realized my mistake right away is that if I've got roboport on its own separate network, that means it doesn't have access to the robots from the other network, which there are now, I believe, 70. So I'm going to be grabbing some robot frames, making some robots, tossing a bunch of stuff in there. And now I'm going to start dropping blueprints. Thinking there's probably a good place to start. And that's 26 in a row. I'm thinking that'll probably work. Then I realized I did it wrong. Very wrong. I wanted to have the ore coming out in the other direction because of how the base is set up. If it's coming out of that far side, it's gonna... I'm thinking sort of like a main bus type thing, although it's gonna be a four-way split at some point. It would end up crashing right into the lake. So I end up flipping it around. So I'm all of the ore is currently coming out of the right side of that furnace block, of which there are not enough furnaces to rebuild the whole block. I probably should have gone ahead and not made it quite so big right away, but I am less worried about having enough furnaces and getting things to work, and more worried about how I'm going to space things out in my factory for the future. So I'm thinking, since you've got iron, copper, and coal right there, you can run them all straight upwards into the input of the furnace block, and then the output's going to come out right next to the input. I just grab a couple of belts and run them down, and then just split them off somewhere where my current factory is. I'm going to get rid of a couple furnaces because just the way that it works out, it would be easier to get rid of those two furnaces, and you'll see me when I'm building furnace blocks in the future. I will end up putting the blueprint over so that the edge furnace is deleted. And that's just from how the blueprint was put together. So I guess that was kind of my mistake. Now I'm going to start running iron over to the furnace block. Sadly, I run out of belts halfway through. And so I am going to do my best to get things there using the belts that I have. At this point, yeah, I realize that the inserter setup is kind of weird, but I'm not too worried. Be putting in a nice power pole there just to power the furnaces, because it's literally a one tile difference between how far the poles reach and how far they need to reach. So I'm not going to put down a second power pole. This is going to be my first main iron output belt up there. So now that there is no longer any iron smelting going on here, I'm going to take down my entire iron smelting area. Of course, I'm also going to need to rework some of my other coal areas, because now I realize that since I don't have iron coming in here, there isn't really much point feeding coal over to the steel furnaces. So I just kind of turned that into a weird load balancer, mostly because of, and the only reason it's weird is because it's a little bit too long. I was just too lazy to make it ideal right away. So we're gonna continue working on my furnace block, and we are going to keep working with the iron. Now, at this point, I'm trying to I'm thinking I might just manually run iron plates down to my gear maker, like all those important things, but I'm not too worried about that. So I'm just gonna take down some of the furnaces that I built, put them down manually, because it's going to make sure that all of them are currently being used. Same thing with belts. I'm going to be taking down some belts that I've built but I'm not using, just to make sure that I can fill in belts that I don't have enough of. Of course, my limiting reagent right now is splitters, so I'm going to be making a whole bunch of splitters and trying to fit them in everywhere. Thankfully, everything seems to be working out pretty good. As for research, gun turret damage is never bad. Doing more damage means you use less bullets. That's not a bad thing. However, I am really starting to feel the belt shortage at this point. So I'm going to be putting up a new assembler specifically for the purpose of making belts and red belts right here. First one's going to have two inputs because it's not just a belt assembler, it's going to be the gear assembler. And now what's going to happen is, ideally, I'm going to have gears in the top one being fed on that belt, and then it'll be fed downwards into the yellow belts, and then it'll take the belt, the side belt, all the way down to the red belt maker. Of course, in reality, that doesn't really work. So I decide to move things down a little bit and just have the yellow belt maker take gears off of the gear belt, for lack of a better term. And I'm going to be limiting to 100 yellow belts and 500 red belts, because I need more red belts than I need yellow belts. Of course, it seems like I am always running short on gears, so I'm just going to throw in another gear maker. Because why not? It's the easiest way to deal with being short on gears, I think, in my opinion. And I'm not sure what the exact ratio should be, but I think I just discovered the perfect ratio here. These two gear makers are going to almost perfectly feed a yellow and a red belt maker. I'm very happy about that. Now, I'm occasionally checking the things that I still need to build, and based on that, I'm dropping constructions into the storage chest that my construction robots are now using. And it mostly works out. Of course, I still don't have enough furnaces, but oh well. There we go. Now I finally got this thing set up. The only thing is, I've got a pile of coal in my inventory that I don't know what to do with, so I'm thinking I'm going to put a chest down right there and drop coal. And the way that actually works out is the coal is going to be taken from that chest before it is passed down from the actual coal storage chest. Just because the load balancer causes coal to be used up, since the coal is mostly being used up on the right side of the belt, the load balancer becomes secondary compared to the chest, which is dropping coal directly down onto the right side of the belt. Of course, I'm also going to need some stone bricks because of the amount of furnaces that I have been building. I am already out of both steel and cold stone bricks, so I'm gonna work on that. And for funsies, I'm just gonna throw an iron dropper type chest into my steel production just to keep the steel running. Now at this point, I'm trying to work out spacers, and because I want to do copper smelting as well. And then I noticed that my spacers were incorrect. So you will see me likely tearing them down, possibly even by hand. And like I said before, I gotta do that offset because of how the blueprint is made. It doesn't work in that direction. It works great in the opposite direction, but it doesn't work in that direction. So we're gonna be doing that offset like so, and then just getting rid of all of the runoff, I guess, the leftover constructions that I no longer need. So that's where my second and third row of iron smelters is going to go eventually. I realize I'm planning pretty far in the future, not too worried about it. I would rather have 3 rows of smelters eventually. Do the same thing for copper, except I'm going to shift it down by 2. The idea here being that if 3 rows of smelters, based on my by far best developed factory, it seems like 3 rows of about 24, 26 smelters can usually works pretty well. So that's my goal here. Just re-blueprint a couple things and start tossing things to build, in other words belts, into the storage chest, and the robots will go off and build them for me. Of course, I'm going to need a pile of inserters, so I'm going to start working on that. And I also need to actually feed copper in. So I'm going to start working on that as well. And I'm going to run all out of belts. And I'm going to come back and I'm going to try to make more belts. There we go. Now we just need a splitter and a couple of underground belts. Specifically, I think I needed 3. Yes, 3 because of that iron belt, ore belt. So there we go. Now we've got copper going into the system, or copper ore. Ideally, we should have copper coming out. Of course, I'm gonna need to put another underground belt there for iron. And there you go. Now we've got iron being made, we've got copper being made. I completely forgot to light up the area. I probably should do that because it is nighttime. It is hard to see, especially on YouTube. But it's a little easier to see here next to the lights. Yeah, I completely forgot about lights this episode. That's probably going to be next episode. So we've got our introductory iron smelters. We've got some copper smelters. Now we need to work on the beginnings of our bus, which is going to be right here. I'm going to grab a bunch of gears. Probably not the best way to make gears just because it's annoying to grab gears off of that belt. Seeing as how the belt is never just overly full with gears. Actually, it seems like I should just be making more and more iron smelters, just since the iron plates really haven't taken off, let's say. Those gear assemblers are eating them up. And here I'm thinking I'm going to make an electric, or a green circuit assembler. This one's going to be in a 3:2 ratio. This is going to be one of my main ones for most of the game. So I'm going to use some underground belts and a splitter. There we go. Now we've got copper supplied. And I put it right there because then I can extend it outwards, I think, for probably 2 more blocks like that before I hit the water. And then there's going to be a shoreline right up next to it, so I'm maximizing space usage. So now that we've got that figured out, we're going to put in 6 inserters, as always. Not entirely certain if that's the ideal number, considering stack inserters. They might be more efficient, but I don't know. So I'm just going to go with what seems to have worked in the past. And right now I'm just grabbing gears. I'm going to need them to make a few stack inserters, few long-handers, and a bunch of mines. Because I realized, based on the iron belt just not even remotely being full, my limiting reagent in my iron supply is not the furnaces, it is actually my lack of mining. So I'm just going to keep mining all of this iron, and it's going to work out pretty well, in my opinion at least. It does end up with a mostly full iron belt, so I call it a success. Of course, I've still got enough copper miners for the copper smelters, considering my electricity production, which is working out pretty well. Try filling in or grabbing some of these edge pieces of iron that I'm not particularly needing at the figure. More iron is better anyway. So now, ideally, I should have lots of iron coming through. I'm eventually planning on a 2-wide copper belt and a 2-wide iron belt, because using express belts, I don't remember the exact throughput figures off the top of my head, but they are big. Like we're talking like 1,300 items per minute per belt. So I'm not expecting to use more than 2 belts of iron and copper in my factory, especially considering I tend to build factories so that there is always overflow on belts. The idea is like it's sort of like a storage system, but at the same time, I'd rather have too many raw materials than not enough raw materials to make finished goods. Because then the bottleneck becomes the finished goods as opposed to the raw materials. Raw material bottlenecks are always very unpleasant. Alright, so now I'm going to finish up this little circuit maker here using my second belt of iron. It's not actually my second iron belt, it's just sort of like a pseudo belt that I put down to as a facsimile of where my second iron belt is going to go. And I've got some inserters going, and there we go. That's going to be my first piece of the bus. So we've got a copper belt. Another copper belt's going to go on the inside of that between where the iron ore and the copper belt is right now. Then we got 2 lines of iron, and we've got green circuits, of which I'm probably only going to do 1 line for now. Never really had a problem with just 1 line of green circuits, especially with an overflow chest somewhere. It seems to work out pretty well. Compression never really been an issue. If it actually becomes like a huge issue, I could either put down more green circuit makers at the beginning, or I can actually just put them farther down at the end. Here I'm thinking, what's one thing that I've been making a lot of by hand that I don't really like making by hand? And the answer to that question is, I guess it's not coming at this exact second, but the answer to that question is repair packs. So I'm making a repair pack maker. So we got this guy making gears, that guy's making repair packs. Sadly, this isn't in logistic range quite yet, but I'm gonna put down a logistic chest there. I'm limiting it to, what is that, 2,000? No, that repair pack stacking stacks of 100. I don't think it's a great limit. I mean, I'm thinking as soon as I hook that up to the logistic network, I'm going to use a smart inserter equivalent to feed 5,000 of them into my logistic system, keep 5,000 in the logistic system, and then have requester chests that keep every single one of the well, maybe not every single, but the edge roboports full. But I'm not too worried about that right now. For now, I'm happy just delivering a giant stack of them by hand. And at this point, I am going to probably end the episode because we're getting there, about 45, 46 minutes in. So we've got a lot of work done on the iron or on the smelting. For some reason, there's something wrong with my electricity. I'm not quite sure what's going on there yet. And then I realize, oh wait, I never had the coal keep going through. So I'm going to manually drop a bunch of coal on the belt. That will hopefully get picked up by these inserters using the power of the sun, because I've got solar panels, you see. And slowly you can see my economy come back to life as the electricity comes back from the steam engines. Problem solved. Yeah. So like, share, comment, subscribe, advise, idea, do all those fun YouTube things. And I will see you guys later. After I fix all the holes in my walls. And yep, just fixing up a couple more walls. Of course, I'm going to have a giant biter attack happen. And after the successful conclusion of that, I shall leave you till next time. Bye! Maybe do some research too.